Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Gunuktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Mastuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work with great energy and vigor. May our studies be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So I'll pause as usual, and you can then ask some questions.
Swami, I have a question, and I think it's around discipline, but I find that generally with the demands of work and then all the other things that need to be done, I always neglect the tidying and sorting of the house. And it brings a lot of shame to me, and I get quite annoyed, but I justify it by saying there's just not enough time in the day. And I would prefer to go and do some spiritual practice than to tidy a room.
Well, that's because you think spiritual practice and tidying are two separate things and separate issues, and they're not. So we all begin with karma yoga. And I've coined a phrase, karma bhakti. I'm not sure if it's my phrase, but certainly it's the one I use, because most of us, when we do what we call karma yoga, it's really karma bhakti. And when we insert a sense of delicious love in it, then it becomes a delightful occupation. Now, tidiness is a very, very important part of karma yoga. It's a very important part of our spiritual discipline, because it actually ties in with that quality that we need to cultivate in niyam, according to Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras, that is purifying, making sure things are clean. You know, when the whole thing passes on to the Chinese system and comes into to the feng shui area, feng shui very sensibly says, along with all Eastern ideas, that energy is naturally all around us, prana. The whole sections on pranayama given by Swami Vivekananda, it has little or nothing to do with breath or breathing. He starts off like that. So prana, you see, as I say many times before, it helps us if we replace these technical terms with vernacular language. Instead of saying prana, let us say energy. The problem is nobody, and it's a science term, nobody, including science, understands or can define energy. We can know what it does, we can know how it moves, but the ancient yogis came up with a single term, prana, understanding it is a mobilizing force of some kind, and it expresses itself in different ways. And in the human body, it expresses itself and is directed in 5 different ways. But there's a great principle when dealing with energy, as for example, feng shui does, because only 2 principles are there. The first principle is try to make things simple and clean. So simple and clean. Try to take away all accumulated rubbish. And of course, if you're speaking from a number 5 point of view, and those who've done the Enneagram with me will understand what that means, then simplicity is something that has to be cultivated. And simplicity, cleanliness, tidiness, all of this sets the orderly tone in the mind. And we're able to deal with the temptation of making things far too complex that obscures everything, thinking about thinking, analyzing for the sake of doing it. And so I'd rather go into my realm of thinking rather than doing, is really what it is. And so we have to assert the qualities of strength, because if for somebody of that type, who prefers to think about doing instead of doing, then it starts off with a word. You cannot divorce a word from a corresponding concept. So when you say strong, strong, strong and repeat it, the body gains in strength, the mind gains in strength. The whole quality of strength gets absorbed, as it were, distributed throughout the body and the mind. And because it's equivalent of exercising will. All exercise of will is a spiritual exercise in tapasya, that is self-discipline. It is taking energy, it is directing it in a cognitive way, in a conscious way, that is, in a systematic way. And really what it is strengthening the will. So when we take on the qualities of strength and courage, goodness, and all these other positive virtues, starting with strength. Strength is the most important virtue. Starting with that, strength. Because it takes strength to go against the grain. It takes strength to form a habit. Now they say, when I say they, I have no idea who they are, but they seem to say many things, so I'll quote them. They say that if you consistently do an action that you're not familiar with for 10 days without a break, in other words, no exceptions, come what may, you have a good chance, or a better chance anyway, of forming a habit. So the idea is not to postpone things. The idea is to go against your own habit and inclination about thinking about it. And when something is out of place, you put it in place immediately. You don't wait till tomorrow or the next day. So you know the trap yourself of doing that. And you may think it's not a priority. Actually, it's a big priority. There's a modern author that people either like or they dislike intensely, and a man called Jordan Peterson, who's come into the limelight of late. And he writes a book, something like 12, something or other. It's along the line of positive thinking. So 12 Habits of Success or something of that nature. And his recommendations are very simple, and he's trained and qualified professorial psychologist, counseling psychologist, neuropsychologist. And so one of the things he says is stand up straight and shoulders back. And another thing he says is make your bed, which is a kind of synonym for make sure that your dwelling place is tidy and clean as well, clean and tidy. So procrastination, overcoming procrastination, is much a spiritual discipline as anything else. And it's a good starting point. Now, it's remarkable when you follow some of the principles of feng shui, and a couple of them seem to be, so if you haven't used anything or something by within 6 months, throw it away or give it away. Let go. So take all the complexity of your life and simplify it. Go to your bare minimum. Now, monastic life does this. Monastic life is designed to go to the bare minimum. Unfortunately, in residential monastic life, as you visit places even, people give you things, and out of love you accept them. But you find that if you keep doing this, you'll be accumulating many things. And after a certain period of time, let's say 6 months, you have to take stock of what it is, supposing it's clothing, and give it away. Give it away to a charity shop, give it away to the poor, give it away to somebody who needs it, but get rid of it. There's a principle based on energetic principles that if you create a gap, something flows through it. If you let go, something flows through it. A simple principle that if you hold a pen in your right hand and hold it with all your might and vigor, then it's impossible for you to open that hand and accept 1 million US dollars or euros or whatever you want, whatever currency you like. And that's true. We hold on to the little things. And the principle, if you like, or the law of energetic flow says that if you're holding on to something small, then you won't be able to fill it with something that is far more abundant. So what are we all holding on to? We're all holding on to an egoistic position, a position that is either defensive or aggressive or stands mesmerized in a yielding position. And we have to firstly take stock of this egoistic position. And philosophy, or the principles of philosophy, allow us to do this. But we can't just simply leave it there. We have to take it further. We have to don't get rid of the ego. The ego is a part of the psychological makeup. It is a part of psychosocial evolution of man, without which man cannot conquer nature. You can imagine a small boy on an elephant, riding an elephant. An elephant has a capacity with one stroke to crush the boy. And yet you see in various places, Myanmar and Thailand and so on, small boys sitting and commanding these elephants. Come on. So the elephant is obviously not aware of its own strength. And the stronger thing is the boy's ego, the boy's self-confidence that says, I can command this elephant. I am the master of the elephant. So this commanding position is a very useful position, without which we don't really have the complex human social structures and the inquiry capacity that man has, and the capacity to conquer nature by harnessing water and wind. I was hearing today that in Ireland, we have the capacity to generate sufficient wind power in terms of electrical energy, enough to export it. That Ireland itself only needs a fraction of what we're capable of producing, because we can say that Ireland is such a blessed and beautiful country. If only they'd improve their weather, is normally the comment afterwards. But the advantage that we have is that we have all these powerful forces around us. The sea, the wind, anything that moves is generating energy. We can convert this energy into electrical energy, and we can export it, just like people have done with oil and petroleum products. When you discover oil in your land, let's say some Middle Eastern country or Nigeria or something, you don't say we'll only produce enough for our own country. No, you produce as much as you can in order to export it. That's the idea. Same thing with all powerful energy, such as derived from wind or wave or any number of technologies which harness the natural forces of nature. So we have the capacity of harnessing these natural forces of nature. This is called pranayama, control of prana, energy. And when you do as simple a thing as cleaning and tidying your dwelling place, you're really facilitating a flow of energy. You can test it out. You'll feel much better, much more relieved. Opportunities and abundance flow to you. And I tell you how I practically employed this. In Zimbabwe, on one occasion, we were down to our last 10 Zimbabwe dollars, I think it was, in a financial crisis. And with that $10, I went to a hardware shop and I purchased a waterfall, a solar-powered waterfall, just a small thing. And all the devotees said, "Oh, you wasted $10 doing this. What a pity." I said, "No, because this waterfall is symbolic. Every time somebody looks at it, it reminds us of the divine flow. Because there's only one energy, that's divine energy. Don't think that you have energy of your own. You're simply a director. Energy arrives at your local station, and you can say, please go here, please go there, and direct it as you want. This is called pranayama. The pranayama is built on the precondition that you have nothing to do with this energy. You're detached from it completely. It is not yours. Just as if I drive a car up to your place in Belfast, say, and you say, oh, you're tired. Aren't you tired of such a long journey? How can I be tired? I just did sitting. The car did all the work. You should direct your question to the car. Are you not tired? Will you not take a rest? But we know that the car is an insentient object. And so to pose such a question to a car would be ridiculous. And yet we put fuel in, and through a combustion engine, which hasn't changed for dozens and dozens of years, actually for a century and more, the combustion engine is designed in such a way that we can convert fuel energy into kinetic energy, and the car moves. And all I have to do is sit, direct a few things here and there, that's all. But I don't put the fuel in me. I put the fuel in the car. Now, if we revalue everything and say, it's not my body, it's the Lord's divine earth car, what fuel will I put in? I'll put in something into the mouth, and whatever I put in gets transformed into a body. Who would suspect? I often get asked, because we have something here called sadhu seva, that means we don't cook where I am. Wonderful, wonderful devotees get together, and they take it in turns by virtue of a rasta to deliver food to us in the monastery. And so I'm often asked, so what is your favorite food? What food do you like? It's an impossible question for me to answer. It's like asking a car, tell me, what fuel do you like? I know you like unleaded. I know unleaded suits you. I know we won't put diesel in you. But, would you like premium? Would you like some other thing? In Zimbabwe, before it became Zimbabwe, we had severe difficulties with fuel. And there was a great, great sugar estate that generated ethanol. And the ethanol was mixed with conventional petrol, and we called it blend. And everybody had no choice. You have blend or blend. So we chose blend, and it worked very well, only a little corrosive. So various parts would have to be stainless steel. But this is a technology that was working in the 1970s, way before its time, I suppose. So when we talk about hybrid cars and blend fuels and so on, it's not a new thing at all. Anyway, you see, the car doesn't mind what fuel you put in. It is a car. And so if you truly re-register the human body as a divine earth car that moves along, then these questions become irrelevant. You put in whatever fuel is suitable. Should it be tasteless? No, it can be tasty. That's fine. That's part of the suitability. Should I not enjoy the food? Yes, I should enjoy the food. But after 2 bites, I will know whether my tongue enjoys the food or not. I don't have to eat bowls and bowls full of it to decide whether it is tasty. And I think this is one of the difficulties that we have in our Western societies, that we tend to eat far, far too much. The overall thing is a simple life. Simple living and high thinking is what we should go for. And part of that simplicity will be to make sure that our dwelling place is clean. And by our dwelling place, I mean external dwelling place, but now in light of the revaluation is also internal dwelling place. And that is the internal of the human body has to be kept clean as well. We do this typically through yoga asanas, moving the lymph around, and also keeping the heart healthy through other aerobic activities such as walking, swimming, etc., or cycling. And with a combination of these, that's one component. But to keep the mind calm and peaceful is the most important thing because of the power of thought. An instant thought will be taken up by every single part of the body. It will affect the cytoplasm in every cell, and it will affect the command structure, if you will, of our own DNA. And it will manifest either as good health with good will or bad health with bad will, albeit unintentionally. If hate is on your agenda, then the next thing you feed in, the stomach says, I hate this because my commander-in-chief told me hate was on the agenda today. Everything gets hated. If I love, then love. The food becomes loved, and all the cells of the body operate in glorious harmony. A kind of dance goes on that exhibits all the enthusiasm and exuberance that the mental field contains. And just to remind you, and today's thought also reminded us that, you see, thought mobilizes subtle forces that lie beneath. We call these tanmatras. These combine and recombine and produce the environment around us. Now, if our mind is lazy, if our mind is lethargic, if it is prone to procrastination, then that's what our environment will produce. And we have a summary term for it. It is called tamas. Literally darkness. But what does it mean? It means anything that is dull, anything that is covering, anything that is static, anything that is full of inertia, and the body can feel it. And if the body can feel it, the mind feels it. And if the mind feels it, the body feels it. So we have to inject, as it were, an element of enthusiasm all the time. So please, enthusiastically, on a daily basis, schedule time for various things that are important, including making sure your environment is always sacred and holy, therefore clean and tidy. A simple formula. We learn a tremendous amount from the simplicities of Japanese Zen gardens. Zen, the corruption of Chan, which in turn is corruption of Dhyan, meditation, and the simplicity and beauty of small Japanese gardens, carefully cultivated. It is the simple beauty that is behind the sanctity of a Zen sanctuary. And why would we find such beauty in it? Because it's simple, and because it's dedicated to quantity, not quality, quality, not quantity. There's no confusion within it. And we find the most aesthetic scenes in the simplicity of it. Of course, that also can be open to corruption, especially if you go to a modern art gallery. And I have to confess, supposing you see a white canvas with a blue dot somewhere in the middle and a signature at the bottom, and everybody, it's a bit like the emperor's, the emperor with the new clothes, and everybody nods and says, oh, it's in the art gallery, it's a famous artist, it must be wonderful. Picasso, understanding this, took a canvas and wiped his brushes on it and sold it for a fortune, and everybody said, probably Picasso, it must be a great work of art, wonderful. He knew the trick, but in amongst that was genuine art expressions, creativity and the novelty that he inserted into his art. Now, for us also to be creative and novel, we have to be genuinely creative and novel, but we have to reduce, we have to engage in the utmost simple living and high thinking as much as we can. Cleanliness. So when it comes to Patanjali's niyama, the second step in his eightfold process, the first thing he mentions will be purity. And commentators will say, because it's a sutra and therefore bare minimum information given, the commentators say this is external purity, but this is also internal purity, purity of mind, purity of body. And so if we surround ourselves with a beautiful environment, we have removed or dealt with one of the 18 obstacles. There are 18 mood creators that I give you in the meditation workshop. That is, if we want to sit and meditate, the first class of meditators will have to artificially stimulate the mood for meditation. This can be done through chanting or music or sounds, or maybe reading a passage somewhere, or through ritual, lighting a candle or a lamp, lighting maybe some incense stick if we're not allergic to that, soft lighting, creating an atmosphere. All of those kinds of things are some of the 18 mood creators. So if we are making our domicile the very place in which we are doing our dedicated spiritual practice, then naturally we have to make the whole thing a shrine. We have to make the whole dwelling place a housing for our divinity to worthily sit in the innermost garbha, or internal womb, as it were, of the shrine. So these are some things I would say, but like everything else, forming a habit requires good time management. And time management doesn't begin with a system, it begins with an attitude. The attitude we should adopt is that all time is divine dispensation of a gift freely given to us as a handout. The Lord stretching his hands, come on, here's a second, please put something in, something useful. When we don't put something useful in, he doesn't stop the time, continues, next second, next second, next second. So if we view time as a dispensed divine grace flowing our way, then we'll use it properly. Now, I remind you, the Bhagavad Gita, we have a definition of yoga. It's two definitions, but to my way of thinking, they are intertwined. Yoga is equilibrium of the mind and skill in action. Doing every action, that is, with great, great expertise, mindfulness, attention, awareness. Doing that without any thoughts of any return, but at the same time, keeping an equilibrium of mind that is derived from the lack of anxiety that comes with future orientation. You make it present orientated. Here, now. And when you tune into the here and the now, and do every action with great mindfulness, and add something more. You add dedicating your action to that divine, infinite, invisible, who comes close to you in the form of a chosen ideal. And you do the action for that entity. And if it's a simple action such as cleaning a house, well, then the act of cleaning is practicing the presence, the divine presence, number one. But two, the act itself, which comes as a unit with a starting point, a development point, and an ending point, and dedicating that whole thing, doing it out of love for the divine. In human love, when you say you love somebody, let's say Mother's Day, you love your mother, then you exhibit that love by sending flowers or taking your mother out for a meal or whatever it is. And you don't expect any return from it, surely, in the highest and purest love. In this same way, all actions can be put as sacrificial actions, making a karma yoga, a yoga, but also making karma a yajna, a sacrificial act, an act of divine offering, asking nothing in return. So I hope that answers your question. I'd say one more thing on it, though. In considering, therefore, all time as a divine dispensation of grace, we do have to do our part in it by being organized. So if you feel that something has to be done and it's not being done, and you would rather sit and meditate, let's say, thinking that cleaning and meditation are separate activities. You see, ironing clothes, I don't call it ironing clothes, I call it Tai Chi, the movement there. See, every action can be a divine action. So if you don't make the separation, then you take care of this resource of time and make sure that you allocate time for the activities that you previously didn't have time for because you relegated them, either because they might be tedious to you or because they might not seem a high priority to you, or you might just be lazy. A number of reasons for putting things off can be there. And so that's the time where you have to allocate time to these activities, just as you allocate time to everything. When people come to me with in a state of stress, mental stress, thinking I provide them with some spiritual counseling, more than likely I give them time management. How many things do you have to do? Oh, 100 things. No, one thing. And then another thing. Live in this present moment. Lesson 1. Lesson 2, make sure that you schedule activities with a healthy contingency on them, and then schedule them into a scheduling tool such as a diary. If you're old-fashioned, diary is fine. And then make sure that the highest priority activities are being done first. Now, what do we consider the highest priority activities in spiritual life? Well, since our purpose in spiritual life will be, in short, total knowledge, total freedom, or in devotional language, vision of God. If we understand that clearly, then that's a beginning of faith. And real faith only comes with a vision. It can be a partial vision, or it can be a partial experience. But every experience will entrench faith more and more and more. And so being systematic is a form of pranayama, because what we're doing is we are steering things in one direction. Swami Vivekananda gives an example of this in his Raja Yoga, saying that the secret of electrical current is that all electrons are flowing in the same direction. When all energy is flowing in the same direction, not dissipated here and there, then it results in a potent effect, in this case, an electrical potential. So we have to learn to stabilize our whole energetic system by making it systematic, making it smooth. I hear the number 4s, the creative people, saying, oh, what about spontaneity? Will it not, if everything is regimented, then what about spontaneity? Yes, please schedule your spontaneity as well. Please schedule your creativity as well. You'll notice that I put out these thoughts every day. How did they originate? Well, at something like 7:30, once I've done some exercise, 7:30 in the morning, 7:30 to 8 o'clock is breakfast time here. I sit and wait, and when a thought comes, I jot it down. By 8 o'clock, I have a poem. Then I used to consult Swami Purnananda and say, okay, can I send you the thought? Yes. Even if I didn't mention it, he'll say, can you send me the thought? And then he finds a compatible photograph that he's taken, or a picture. And by 8:30, the whole thing is published on a daily basis. So 4 volumes like that are there, one published already, one about to be published with a forward already constructed. So what is this creativity? Creativity is scheduling time for it. Scheduling time for it, in this case 7:30 to 8, But the actual creative process is putting the ego to one side, being in a listening mode, and catching the wind of divine grace that comes, so that it comes in the form of a seed idea and comes out as concepts, and concepts comes out as words, and words, if you have a certain skill, come out in the form of poetic lines, and that's it. And whether it's good or bad, you don't worry about it. Just the first draft, you don't do more than one go at it, because you trust the divine creative process. It is a divine creative process that is happening. And so we have to schedule all these activities, because to waste time is to waste a divine gift. And we have to understand that all activities are spiritual. There's no such thing as secular activities. There are only activities comprising meditation with eyes open and meditation with eyes closed. And what you call your normal waking life is meditation with eyes open. That's all the difference. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Swami. That's really fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So any other questions in the offing?
Good evening, Swami. I wrote a question, in the chat, but maybe I'm too pessimistic for you. Maybe it's a question you don't like.
Okay, let me read it out. Good evening, Swami. So far, so good. Vivekananda said that it's when, sorry, I have the sunlight in my eyes. Let me shift this a little bit. Let us see now. Vivekananda said that it's when lions, is it? Lions are struck to the heart that they roar the louder. Do we need to be so much wounded to get wisdom and eventually have a vision of God? Very good. It's a good question. All right. Well, yes and no. Life has a habit of poking us a little bit. And nature is not all smooth. It's not designed to be smooth. We have to have the capacity to deal with anything with even-mindedness, equal-mindedness. And so it's not whether wounds are necessary in life or pain is necessary in life. It's more, how do we cope with such a thing in a mature way, in a systematic way, in a calm way, and in a productive way? So that requires a certain reevaluation. First of all, there could be a tendency to think pessimistically that life was against us. Remember, I mentioned it yesterday, I think it was last night, that I was at a book launch and there was a person who highlighted some areas in the book, which was a history of a certain religious organization in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe from 1879 to 2022. And I was naturally invited to the book launch, coming from Zimbabwe, having an interest in these things. And I asked a very awkward question. And that stimulated a reaction from one of the members of the audience, who over a casual cup of tea said to me, you see how bad life was, how wounded everybody is. And this question of roaring, yes, a lion roars more when it is wounded. But why is it roaring, if you take that analogy? Is it roaring with pain, with frustration, with anger, with aggression? Now, I happen to know lions, by the way. I come from Africa. And I can assure you it's a mixture of anger, struggle, roar, survival, all of those things. And I think you'll find our particular wounds in life would be all of those things. And all of those things are negative. Now, the key to managing human life, which is the same as managing spiritual life, since we are essentially pure spirit. So the key really is, firstly, to understand life is not uneven. Secondly, we have the capacity to handle every difficulty and vicissitude in life. And the worst thing we can do is to complain and to do some roaring of our own in a negative way, not in a way of strength. There's another kind of roaring, I think, that you're referring to. We'll come to that now. In other words, if a road is strewn with tough thorns, put tough shoes on. If the road has potholes, take a four-wheel drive. We have the capacity to take any situation and to find a way around. That's how we are designed. If you understand, we are comprised of infinite possibilities, biologically called DNA. The whole structure of whoever you are, whoever you were, whoever you will be, all your potential is contained in the central hub of every single cell of your body, the nucleus of that cell, which you can't see with the naked eye, and that contains over 100,000 coded messages, and we are probably not using half of them, if that, maybe not even 10%. We have infinite possibilities and are structured in such a way that we can take any situation in life and use it to our advantage. Just like if you have an exercise program and you want to build up muscle in the gymnasium, then you will take the obstacles to your own muscles. You will take weights and so on, and you will use them, you'll exercise with them, and every day becomes easier until you have mastered one thing. Why do I say gymnasium? Because Swami Vivekananda compared this whole world to a grand gymnasium. We use a number of analogies. We can say gymnasium. If you're academically minded, you can say this world is like a huge university with innumerable opportunities for us to pass our exams, including other lives. But every second is an opportunity. They say every second, they say the last moment is the most important moment. They're talking about death. But every moment, every second is the last moment. What did you put into it? Now, if you have a certain sporting mindset, then you'll take all the challenges that you like, and you won't get a mortal wound. The analogy about a lion is a little bit strange because we never receive a mortal wound. We receive a wound that we can recover from. And the worst and most difficult wound that we can receive is the wound of the grief of bereavement. I don't know any wound which is worse. And there are other wounds, of course, but all wounds are associated with the threatening of glaciers or obstacles, namely clinging to life or depriving us of something that we are attached to. And you see that clinging to life and this attachment are exactly the same. Clinging to life means I'm attached to a body. And clinging to pleasure, that's another variation of it. It's to do with my individuality, supposed individuality, which is a mistake. And so it's derived really from this area of egoism, ahamkara, aham, sense of I, and in turn is derived from avidya, that is ignorance. That's the process. So the whole of life should understand, let us now try to do the reverse. Let us try to get knowledge, since it's the only antidote to ignorance. Let us do it by reframing the ego and making it an open channel for divine grace to flow, re-registering everything to the divine with one of two methods, either seeing the theistic God in all beings and all beings in that, and allowing that to mobilize love within us, or seeing that divine grace, that divine energy flowing through all limbs, including the onlooker's limbs, through all limbs, all heads, all hands, all eyes, all ears. See that flow going on all inclusively. In these ways, we declutch the ego, and as soon as we do that, we are no longer attached to the external objects of the senses. And the sense of absence, or the sense of some kind of internal gap that we have to fill from the outside, we call this desires, automatically goes away by itself. You don't have to attend to it. No discipline required for it in that sense. And the clinging to life, well, that goes away as well. Because we re-registered, it's just a body. The body comes and goes, I remain the same. So wounds in life or difficulties in life, these are necessary things. That's the yes part. How we handle them, that becomes a whole worthwhile educated process. And are they generally necessary? They are necessary because we need to learn how to handle them. In terms of lions, we should all be more leonine-like. Swami Vivekananda says, let there be a dozen such lion souls in each country. Lions who have broken their own bonds, who have touched the infinite, whose whole soul is gone to Brahman, who care neither for wealth, nor power, nor fame. And these will be enough to shake the world. You don't have to be a wounded lion. You can be a lion that exerts its strength and has a transforming effect, shaking the whole world. Those who give themselves up to the Lord do more for the world than all the so-called workers. If you seek your own salvation, you will go to hell. It is the salvation of others that you must seek, and even if you have to go to hell in working for others, that is worth more than to gain heaven by seeking your own salvation, all in the context of leonine characteristics. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, all right, thank you.
Well, we have another 10 minutes to go or so. We can take some more questions, or we can leave it at that. It's up to you. Here, the sun came out. It decided to come out from its hiding. It was all behind the clouds today, and temptingly coming out in bits and pieces. But now, towards the evening time, it's glorious, glorious sunshine. You may see it coming from this direction. So,
Swami,
yeah.
This question's probably too long of an answer. You've only 10 minutes. I was going to ask you about people with addictions. I'd done a bit of work with a fella, and then he's off cocaine 2 years now, but he was describing to me the burning desire he had for it, and even his pregnant wife would be begging him on her knees not to go out and get more when they had no money and stuff, but he says it was just overwhelming. Is that something that the spiritual path will wash over? Or it says maybe the question, maybe the answer is too long. Or
no, that's fine. Yeah. The chances are, if such a person has an addiction at their level, their family, that is father, mother, etc., would have had a similar addiction. Would that be the case?
Both his mother and father were alcoholics, and his older brothers used to bring drugs in the house, so he was taking drugs from a young age.
Yeah. So you see, there's a background there like that, and that's the problem that we have. That we echo all the exemplary behaviors that we catch in our childhood. And that's really what we call the key to these severe substance addictions. So generally, anyway, we're all addicted to something. On the Enneagram, you'll see that all the 9 numbers are addicted to something, and there's an antidote also. So by understanding addictions in general, we can see if we can understand specific addictions, even in their acute state. Generally speaking now, we can easily overcome an addiction by replacing it with another addiction. We can easily overcome an addiction by replacing it with another addiction. Would that bring the mind down? Would that bring the body down? Would that make us weaker? The problem is with addictions is it weakens. It weakens the body, weakens the mind, it weakens society. Everybody all around is weakened. All people associated with that person become codependents perhaps, and so on. So what addiction should we replace this current addiction with? It should be a positive one. And we have to orientate the person toward the things that they never noticed previously. Draw their mind out. Now, as with any substance abuse, there is a sudden withdrawal, which is drastic, or there is the progressive withdrawal, which may or may not work. So, without addressing the substance abuse, introducing the person to a different way of thinking, a reevaluation that has a higher reward than the effects of an addiction. This is why there are many institutes, Christian institutes, for example, who teach about the salvific value of Christ. And they have had some level of success as well with it. Now, the problem with that, of course, is there's theological baggage that goes with that, some difficulties that go with that. So what should we do if we have no stake to claim, no bone in the fight? Then we, first of all, become an example of the highest ideal ourselves. I think it's the highest level of egoism and pride or lack of humility to say, I can help somebody. Nobody can help anybody. Because the way we view it in Vedanta is that beyond the borders of the suffering person, physical, mental, emotional, psychological, is the eternal, all-perfect, one without a second, where no addictions or imperfections lie, it is full and free and perfect. And when we can penetrate with a penetrating vision to that level, we have mobilized spiritual healing. What is the secret of spiritual healing? Not seeing things in a usual way, seeing things at the core and diving down to blissful base in the other, with the surety that we have done it for ourselves. So the first thing we have to do is make sure that we are fully aligned to the supreme principle ourselves, engaged in our own spiritual practice, systematically, living our life in such a way that our mind is tuned in to cosmic mind continuously, what we call God. Doing that, doing all actions, in other words, enacting the 4 yogas, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Dhyana Yoga. And on that basis, we can now be a pillar of exemplary strength for another. Otherwise, several things could happen. We could be a codependent of the other because we sympathize, think people are suffering, and so a little bit of the addiction is okay. That might be one approach. Or we might be critical and harsh and say, you should not be doing this, and take the substance away immediately. But a third approach is that we ourselves look at things in a different way, and we see the other person as an opportunity for worship, Of course, compassion also comes in there, but compassion only comes at the level of the physical, only the level of the social implications of that person, the level of the mind, and the level, then when it comes to the level of the spirit, then that yields, compassion yields to adoration. Putting that mental frame in will yield a flow of that perfection that comes from within. This is the secret of spiritual healing. So that's the first thing. And then once we have succeeded in doing that, we can now suggest that they find their rewards in the same kind of thing that you found, bearing in mind, if a person is whatever, 30 years of age, and the substance abuse has happened from very young, and they have a history from a previous life that landed them in that environment in the first place, and that friends and family all have addictions, then it becomes not as easy a thing as you might think. That's why we call it an addiction. But step by step, starting point is make sure you yourself have no addictions. Secondly, make sure that you're a shining example of that. Thirdly, make sure that you see beyond the compassionate realms to the perfection within, worship that. And then whatever is action happens from there is a spontaneous, appropriate action. And to teach them a little bit about their higher destiny in subtle ways, suitable ways. This requires a level of expertise also. That's why we have teachers. That's why we have people skilled in that, why we have swamis and monks and others like that. So that they work they're in an environment. Now I'll give you an example. We've created an ashram here. As soon as you walk into this, and somebody mentioned it last night, immediately calmness descends. Because we've created an atmosphere here where 40 years ago, the atmosphere was extremely negative. If you're theologically inclined, you might even call it evil. And it was a center for addictions. In other words, it was a shop, but certainly it would have serviced people with marijuana and maybe other substances. It would be a place where maybe alcohol was consumed. It was a place for hooliganism and bad behavior, all of those kinds of things. And we have transformed it into an atmosphere of loving peace that has affected the whole area in which we live. And the whole area we live is an area rife with addictions. And so it is easy to transform the environment that you're in. It is easy to transform people if you can bring them into an area like this. So I can assure you that there are many people with addictions who come to our door for help. We invite them in. Please sit down, please have a cup of tea. And we don't talk about anything. We don't talk about their addictions. We don't talk about their social difficulties and problems or families. We sit there, we enjoy a cup of tea. That's it. And that very outlook, that very atmosphere, when they leave, they say, oh, thank you so much. I feel so different. But it's like kicking a football up. It'll come down at some point, and they know they can come back. And every time they come back, they see, well, this has nothing to do with conversion. It doesn't seem to be addressing my problem directly. And yet, the whole atmosphere, the whole feeling, the whole outlook has changed my own outlook. And I go away floating on the air, as it were. So this is useful and helpful in terms of people who have addictions. Don't think you're a helper. That's the highest form of hypocrisy and the highest or the most profound level of exaggerated egoism that you can have. You cannot help anybody. We can only worship the God within them and do whatever compassion drives us toward. So one's own attitude sometimes has to change and dealing with these issues.
Thank you, Swami.
Okay. Physician, heal thyself. You see, if you become a beaming entity, if you become tuned to the divine and beam your divinity everywhere, won't it have a transforming effect to everyone you meet and to every circumstance that sits around you?
Yes.
Yes, it will. You cannot hide your lantern under a bag or a bed or a bushel, says Jesus. It is there to shine. Bhagavad Gita goes a step further. It tells us somebody like that, with steady wisdom, will shine from all their pores, their face, everything will shine with this divinity. So be a shining light, like a kind of lighthouse, welcoming, warning, befriending, loving, accepting, not criticizing, not blaming, that kind of attitude. If you want to have a correcting attitude, you'll have multiple things, endless things for the rest of your life to correct. And then you'll complain at the end of your journey, oh Lord, I wanted your presence, I wanted your truth, I wanted the freedom. I had no time for it. I was busy helping people. I was busy trying to correct things. Every time I saw something, I corrected it. Why? And the Lord would reply, you asked that you wanted to be a corrector. I gave you what you requested. I gave you many things to correct. You can't complain now. You yourself requested it. We leave it there then. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Swami.
Swami.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om